Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series and our program, Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my co-host today, Dr. Katherine Ramsland. Katherine,
Hello, good to be back.
always good to have you here. And we have an excellent guest today. Uh, Actually fascinating. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Uh, because you have an unusual story and an unusual situation and you interfaced with an unusual person and all of that's to say is it Kathy Rubin, and we appreciate you being here, and we want to talk about you and about your book and about all this stuff, so thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to speak with you and Katherine.
Well, good. So let's talk about your upbringing. Where did you grow up and how did you end up at Florida State, uh, and what was that all about?
I was born in Miami, and my parents were from my mother. I'm sorry, my mother was from Cuba, and she came over when she was very young. So it was I had my brother, my sister, and myself, and I lived in Miami for a while, and then we moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. When I was 13, I became very ill and was in the hospital for 3 months while the doctors tried to find out what was wrong with me and how they could help me, but they couldn't. And after 3 months, they told my parents to go ahead and take me home and and keep me comfortable because they didn't know how much longer I would have to live. Um, we did. We went home, and I didn't understand how sick I was. I was just knowing that I was not myself. And a doctor from Cuba approached my parents and said she had some experimental chemo that she wanted to give me because she thought I had lupus. And I did. I have early childhood lupus, which is very unheard of.
Yes.
And so I did take the chemo and I lost all my hair. I was homebound for my seventh grade of school. I could look out and see my friends, and they didn't really want to look out and see me because they were playing. So it was kind of a time that was very quiet for me. My parents worked all day, so I couldn't actually see. Um, I don't actually see the effects of how I looked with no hair. I asked my mother over and over if I could go out, and no, you can't. No one can come in. So we went through that weekly. But during that time, I understood that I didn't want to live like that. This was not going to be normal for me. So I sucked it up and I laid in bed and slept most of the days, or else I'd watch TV. I'd call zero and talk to the operator just to have some input during the day. And I wanted to feel better, like I said. So I didn't I didn't crawl into a hole. I did everything I could to feel better, and I just knew I would. It was just something I was going through. My parents finally let me out of the house. One morning, I talked them into letting me go to church. So I went to church, and not 10 days later, I came home with shingles. So now I'm bald. I have shingles on my cheek and my chin and my neck, and I I was going to go out anyway. It was just like, I don't care what I look like. I just want to go out and feel the sun on my face and just do that. So I did. I got better in my head. Therefore, I started receiving and being better. Finally, I was allowed to go to eighth grade. And then I went to high school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I loved it. No one knew me because I was gone so long from them. So I joined as a freshman, joined theater class, to the drama class. And I thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I could act and be anyone I wanted to be, except that sick little bald kid head that was homebound in seventh grade. And it was great. I made friends, and I still have friends from high school now that I hang with. And my husband, we were in theater together. We never dated or anything, but we go back that far that we were in the same class. So now it's time to pick a college after I graduated. So a bunch of my friends from Fort Lauderdale were going to different schools within the state, and some of my best friends were going to FSU. So I looked around and I looked on a map and I said, hey, this is far away from Miami where my parents lived as I could get and still get in-state tuition. So FSU was my big decision to go there. So I did, and my friends did. And as a freshman, I joined. I lived in a dormitory, which was all female. My mother was very protective of me after being sick so long. So I went to the dormitory, and in the fall of '76, I went and rushed the sorority's Chi Omega, and I was asked to become a pledge in the sorority, which was so cool because now I had like 40 women that became my best sisters ever. And it was just an exciting time for me. It was during Rush. We went around and did work in the community, and we sang songs. We learned all about the sorority itself and its background. So it was great.
Yeah.
So toward the end of the year, it was time to go home for summer. And my parents thought that if they could get me to live in the sorority house, that would be so much safer than to live in a dormitory. And I can't imagine the angst they must feel because of making that decision, because that put me in the bed where Ted Bundy attacked me. So I moved into the sorority house in the fall. I had my roommate and we were going to decorate the room, and it was just a good time. It took me forever in December to find my bedspread, my beautiful bedspread, but I did. These little things were so important to me at the time. They seem small now, but these are things I look forward to and I do remember. So we come into January of 1978. I was a sophomore now. I had lots of friends. I had to go to class, but it was just a good time. And during that, in the early part of January, I didn't have any big thoughts, and I wasn't a activist or anything for pro life, or I'm sorry, to execute them or not, to let them live or to kill them. And that just wasn't in my thoughts. So on January 14th, the day before the attack, I went to bed. I went to a wedding, I'm sorry, on the 14th. And it was a great little wedding. In the evening, a bunch of us students went over to one of the apartments, and we had a potluck dinner. That was fun, and being with people I loved. But I had a test on Monday, and it was calculus. So I thought I should go home early a little bit so I could at least open the book and see what it was I was supposed to be learning. So I did around 8:30 or 9. I went back to the dormitory. I'm sorry, I went back to the sorority and got into bed and studied. And my roommate was also in the room studying. Our room was on the second floor of the sorority house. Our window faced the back parking lot and the back of the yard. The size was a typical dorm room. And on each side, we had a mirror image. We had our dresser, our desk, and then our twin beds. The headboard of our bed was against the back wall, which was a big bank of windows. And we had plants hanging on the curtain rods. So we always left our shades open and felt the sunlight come in. So this was my room. This was around 12:30 at night. We decided to go to sleep. We turn off the light and go to bed. Between our two twin beds was a small footlocker. I placed my glasses on that footlocker and decided to turn around and go to sleep. It didn't take me long to go to sleep. I tend to fall asleep quickly. But sometime in the night, I didn't know what was going to happen. Downstairs, around 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a light and a girl that came home from a sorority from a date that night. But someone before her had slipped into the back door of the sorority. He had crouched down into the bushes and in the dark and watched when some sorority sisters came home and how they just opened the door. It wasn't locked. The door, it didn't lock because of the way the lock was broken. So this guy saw the door was open and he went in. He picked up a piece of firewood, a log, from the firewood we had next to the stairs. He walked into the sorority, into the dark room that was our rec room. He rounded the corner, and in the foyer, there was a beautiful wooden staircase. He went up that staircase with his oak club, and he opened the door on his right. And that door was Margaret Bowman. She was home. She was the only one in the room, and she was sound asleep. Bundy went and attacked her with that log. He hit her so hard that it cracked open her skull. He also strangled her with some pantyhose that he had brought with him. After the attack, he put the sheets up under her chin and it looked like she was sleeping. He then left the hall and he went across it to the next room, and that was Lisa Levy's room. She was alone in the room that night and she was in bed. Bundy went in and attacked her. He raped her with a bottle. He bit her. He hit her with the log and he left her for dead. He then left her room and went in the hallway. He took the next right, and that was my room, room number 8. He slowly opened my door. 3 in the morning, and I hear this swish where the back of the bottom of the door was rubbing against the carpet. I heard this, and I heard the swish, and it brought me awake a little bit. It wasn't a noise that would scare me. It was just something that kind of woke me up. And a few minutes later, I hear this thud, this loud noise, the trunk between our 2 beds, that little footlocker, he tripped on it. This person had entered my room. He was carrying that oak log, and he was now standing at the next to my bed. And I'm awake enough to see what was going on, but without my glasses, I couldn't make anything out. And I'm laying there, and as I'm looking, I see him raise his arm up over his head. And in that arm, in that hand, he had that firewood, that oak firewood he had just killed Margaret and Lisa with. He slammed it down on my face so hard, it broke my jaw in 3 places. It tore my cheek wide open, and it about severed my tongue. I also received lacerations in my face and shoulders. My roommate started to stir because she heard the noise. He went across the bed, hit over that trunk again, and he attacked her with that log. And as he was attacking her, she put her arms up for defense, and he broke her arm. And then she passed out. Now I'm on my side of the room in my bed, and I've made myself into the smallest little ball I could make because I thought if he couldn't see me, he wouldn't kill me. And as I'm laying there and looking, he comes back to my side of the bed, and I'm curled tight. And the next thing I see is his arm being raised up over his head again. Just then, a bright light shone into the bedroom. It illuminated the whole room and made it bright. Now I could see that there was someone standing next to me, and he was lit up in the room, and he started getting antsy. He didn't know what was going on. So he kind of antsed around a little bit, and then he ran out of the house down the stairway, and out the front door. And that light was a car that had pulled up into the back parking lot that our windows were open to. He left off a sorority sister from a date, and then he left, and the room was dark again. I'm in my bed and I'm yelling for help and I'm screaming, but all I'm doing is making gurgling sounds because of all the blood and the torture and the injury to my face. So I'm laying there whimpering. A little while later, my roommate got up and walked out into the hallway to see if she could find someone to help us. And a sorority sister was there. She led her back into our bedroom, turned on the light, and that's when she saw the blood on my wall, the blood on her wall. And I'm sitting there in just rocking back and forth. And she then started the process of calling 911, and the police came and the paramedics came. And I remember being so scared, but the first time I saw that police officer standing next to me, he bent down and said, "Don't be afraid, honey. It's okay. I'm here. I'm going to take care of you." And in as much pain and as scared as I was, he was going to take care of me. And I had that in my head. So the paramedics came and worked on me, and they carried me down the wooden staircase out into the front door. The gurney was very cold. It was freezing when we opened the door. It was in the 30s outside. It was misty. And I had on this silver little blanket that they put on me to keep me warm. And as we were walking down the staircase and out the door and on the sidewalk, the lights were flashing from the ambulance and the police cars and the fire trucks, and were red and blue and white and swirling. And for a minute, I thought I was at a carnival. My mind had taken me somewhere that was something familiar, something I would like to go to. And for brief minutes, it gave me peace. Now, all of this is happening in totally minutes, and my feelings are, seconds into one mode, into scared, into hurt. So that was a time, I think, that brought me into conscious that, I'm going to be okay. Just like when I had chemo and bald, I was going to be okay. I was going to get through this. Then they took me into the ambulance and took me to the hospital. And I stayed there after surgery on my jaw. They wired it shut in 3 places and closed my cheek. And I was there for about a week in the hospital.
Wow. What a story. My goodness. I mean, that's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I'm assuming that you at least had heard of Ted Bundy prior to this,
I wish I
even
could
though he
say I
was on the
did.
other side of the
Why would
country.
you? He hadn't
I
been.
mean, I was into
That's
frat
true. He hadn't been
parties.
arrested yet. That's
No,
true.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had heard
hardly
about,
anybody knew
had you
who he
heard about
was.
stuff back in the West, though?
Well, maybe.
Yeah, but you don't know. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I was not a big current events when I was living on.
That's
Crime
true.
was not a big news thing either back in the 70s.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we felt safe on campus, and I never even thought not to be safe. I mean, it was safe, and it was fun being there. I really enjoyed my time at FSU. After I was in my room,
When did you learn that Bundy was the guy? Several
that
weeks later when he was
yes,
arrested? Yes.
yes, I was down in Miami, recuperating with my family, and that's when he was arrested in Pensacola.
Yeah.
And once they did arrest him with Ken Casares was the sheriff in Leon County, and he did his homework. And he thought that the things that Ted Bundy did on the West Coast were very familiar to what he did in the Chi Omega house. So thank goodness for him. But Ken Casares kept him in his prison in Tallahassee until things moved along. When I was in the hospital, the detectives were asking me all these questions. What did he look like? Who was he? What did he wear? On all this. And I couldn't answer anything. I had no answers. My jaw was wired shut for one thing, and I couldn't talk, but I just had no memory. I was just in a haze. They hypnotized me in the hospital, and they thought that maybe it might open up a little bit so that I could help the detectives. And that's how I know exactly what happened to me that night and exactly the way the events unfold, because I was hypnotized and I knew it. I heard it. And as I was talking, I felt like I must be making this up because I don't remember any of this. But it's what happened. It was exactly what happened. So when I left the hospital about a week after the attack, the police officers took me back to the sorority house. They wanted me to go up into my room and see if anything was missing, if anything was taken from the dresser from the person who attacked us. I didn't want to do it, but an officer took each elbow and walked me slowly up that wood case. We turned the corner, and there was yellow crime scene tape on Margaret's room and yellow tape on Lisa's room. And then the next room was mine, and there were a lot of people standing around it. And as I entered the room, all I could see was the black dust for fingerprints and people standing around in there. And I looked at my dresser, and I don't even remember what was on it, much less to say what was off of it. So I looked at my dresser, then I looked next to it at the desk, and then I saw my bed. And I walked over to it, and it was now stained in brown blood. And that beautiful comforter I had picked out was in a wad all balled up with brown stains on it. And as I stood there and looked at my bed and looked at the wall with my blood, I was glad I did it because I know this is where it happened. I didn't have to have those. I wonder, I knew. And this was something I could wrap my head around. After that, they took me back to the car and went to the airport, and I flew home with my parents back to Miami.
Wow. And when did you, so after you learn about this and you're recovering from this, uh, what was the next thing that came through your mind? I mean, how did you process all of this and learn to say, wow, that's over with, but it's not over with?
When I first went home for recovery, I was having a lot of just weird things in my head, not understanding what I was thinking and doing. There weren't any therapists back then that were there for me. So I didn't have anyone to talk to except my mama, and she just couldn't help. She had no concept of what to say for me. But I became withdrawn and sad and scared. And I knew this was not going to be me. I was not going to live like this. I didn't have to because I could be better than this. And in my mind, way out in the distance, I saw a little island. It had one palm tree on it and one little sand chair. It was so far off, I could barely see it. It was just so far out. But behind me was this big mass, this big cloak of just nastiness. And it was like ready to cover me up, to use me as like a cape and surround me. But I wasn't going to let that happen either. So I took baby steps to get to my island. And it took me days and maybe weeks to get to that island, little baby steps, the days I could. And as I walked forward, I looked behind me, and that black mass was baby steps behind me. When I finally reached my island, I sat down, I put my toes in the sand, and I looked up, and this black mass was completely gone. All I could see was the beautiful sea and the sunshine on it. And I'm in a good place now. I'm gonna do this. And it was a good feeling for me to feel strong enough mentally and physically now that I could live through this moment. When my jaw was opened up about 9 weeks later, I could only eat whatever came through a straw. So Bundy had loosened my teeth up and shifted them. So I did have spaces now for the liquids to go down. But people used to tell me, "Aren't you afraid of men? You don't know who happened to you." Yeah, maybe I should be afraid of men. It wasn't something I thought of. But when my jaw was opened up, I went and got a job at a lumber yard in Miami because I figured where I'm going to see the most men in the shortest amount of time that I could. So I went to the lumber yard. Oh my gosh, the mama didn't like that at all. She was just like, "What?" But I did. And I think there was once or twice someone kind of gave me an off feeling, and I was a cashier and I'd slide underneath the register and someone else would make the sale. But every sale I made it a point to look at the person's face, to look them in their eyes, and to ring up the register and say thank you. I didn't want just a blank face in front of me. I wanted to see someone. So after a couple of weeks of doing this, I didn't have to do it anymore. I wasn't afraid of men. And I learned that the cutest construction workers go to lumber yards. And that if nothing else, I saw a bunch of cute construction workers. But those are the things that kind of I talked in my head to do to help me through things. Like I said, there was no therapy, and I was just kind of doing this on my own. But I found those two things to be very helpful for me in recovery.
Sounds like you're a great therapist. I mean, that's actually very good. It's like get back on the horse.
Yes.
It's like get back on with life, and I really admire that. Did you deal with what they call survivor's guilt and all that? Why me and why not her, and or did that go
Uh,
away quickly? Or
I don't think I ever had it. I
okay,
was focusing on myself to get
right,
better. I knew everything that was happening as I found out little by little.
right,
And I never felt why me. I felt I'm good.
yeah,
I'm okay. Of course, my heart broke for everyone else, the other sisters, Margaret and Lisa, and their families and their
sure,
friends and everything. But I was going to be okay, and I had no guilt for being okay.
good.
And then you had to face going to trial.
Yes, this was 1978, January. In the fall of 78 was the deposition. I was called in. We were flown back up to Tallahassee from Miami, and I was taken to a big room, a conference room. And the police officer opened the door and allowed me to go in. And there was this long conference table in front of me, and there was defense lawyers on one side and prosecution on the other side. And I sat down at the head of at the table, and I looked up, and there was Ted Bundy at the other end of the table. And he was looking at me, and I was staring back at him. I wasn't scared. I felt like I was strong. I felt confident in who I was now, and that he didn't kill me. And I was confident in myself. And I stared at him, and I really don't remember all the questions that I was asked by the defense and by the prosecution. But I do remember the defense asking me, did I go out often late at night? And could I have ever been out with Ted Bundy? Did I ever see him dancing in a club? And did I wear short dresses when I went out? And it was almost like they were making me feel bad, or it was my
Hmm.
fault that I was attacked. And I went on the defensive because what they were doing wasn't right. They weren't going to make me feel like I deserved any of it. So at the end of that process, I stood up and went out the door to my parents, and we flew back home to Miami. The trial was then set in June of 1979. It was going to be in Tallahassee, but there was a change of venue because they didn't think they could get enough jury that wasn't biased or already knew enough about the trial. So they moved it to Miami. It was crazy down there. And the trial was the first time it was televised on TV, the first court case. And there were people everywhere. And on TV, I didn't go to any of the court days because I was told not to. So I would see it in the evening, I would see it on television, and I would see all the girls just fluttering and oohing and awing over Bundy. And I don't get it. I mean, they needed to get a life, but thinking about it, I think that they may have had that maternal feeling like I can fix him. I can go in my love and my care, and I can make him better. Or the other way, I want to be with a bad boy, but I'm
Yeah.
safe. I can be, I can walk with him and talk to him and write him letters, but he's my bad boy, but I'm safe at home at night. So all this stuff is going on. And now it was the day for my testimony. And I remember waking up that morning and getting a red dress out of my closet, bright red dress and white sandals. And I was so happy to be going to trial and to testify and tell my story. Waiting to be taken into the courtroom, I was put into a conference area, a room. And in there was the police officer that took care of me that night. He also was the one that followed me into the ER and stayed with me until they took me to the operating room. He was someone that gave me so much peace of mind at that night, and I loved on him and I hugged him. And the paramedics were there, and I loved and hugged on them, saying all the things you want to say and never could. So this was a good feeling for me. And now it's my turn to go into the courtroom. And I went in through the back of it, and I walked down the foyer, the walkway, and I get to the jury box, and they swear me in, and I sit down. And as I sit, I look around the room and I see the jury sitting, and then I see the prosecution table. And I know now, I know some of them now. So I knew them. And then I looked, and there was Ted Bundy sitting at the defense table. And he was just kind of, not interested, just, like wasting your time. Come on, let's get over this. He wasn't he wasn't in a state of alert or anything. He was just kind of bored being there. So I stared him down again. I didn't want to take my eyes off of him. Now I felt power. I felt like we were doing this. We were going to get him, and he better know it because it's happening. So again, the defense asked me questions I don't remember, except for one. At the end, they said, "Is this the man you allegedly saw in your room that night that attacked you?" And I had to say, I don't know.
Mhm.
I wanted to help convict him. I really did. But I didn't have my glasses on and I couldn't see, and the room was dark. And when it lit up, my eyes were in a little ball. So I couldn't say that was him. That's the man that attacked me. And even now, I feel hurt that I couldn't come through and help with my testimony to help convict him. But it happened anyway. And I left that the session then, and went out in the hallway and about threw up. I mean, all the things that were inside of me just kind of wished out. And I was going to move on. I was going to get past this too and go forward. He was sentenced to life to be executed. And it actually took 10 years for him to come and be killed on January 24th in 1989.
Right.
There were 4 stays of execution. And I hear that now on the TV, he received a stay, this or that. And I didn't really understand it. But it's when a judge agrees that the defendant needs more time to either review or go for an appeal, or to do more research. So they give him a stay.
Today
And
is
that was
actually one
so,
of the anniversaries of this day.
yes, yes. And it was so unfair because Lisa and Margaret and all the women he killed didn't get a stay.
No.
They were dead and they were gone. And here he is getting another stay. And that happened for the 10 years until he was executed. I remember the day of the of the execution. I had received state phone calls during the years and told he's going to get another stay. So it's not happening now. So over the 10 years, we received information on that. And this morning, on the 24th of January, 1989, I received a phone call, and that was the district attorney and the prosecutor from Tallahassee. And they said, "This is it. This is the day. He did not receive a stay. It's going to be killed today." So they kept me informed from midnight on through the wee hours. My husband and I woke up and we sat downstairs and had a cup of coffee on our love seat and watched on television at all this both sides, people saying kill him, and the other one saying no, let him live. I believe it was Fry Bundy Fry,
Yeah.
and then some
Mhm.
other
Friday.
sentences.
Yeah.
Friday, yes. And so Scott and I watched that, and just the confusion, the commotion, everything. I didn't have a response to what they were saying or doing, so I didn't have a comment at that point. But they did tell me in the early hours before 6 that this was going to happen. He was going to be taken down, and that he was going to be strapped into the chair. And I couldn't wait. I really couldn't wait for it to happen. It seems so long ago. They showed on television where the lights flickered in the penitentiary. I got a call and said it was over. He was dead. I sat on the sofa with my husband, cried. He wrapped his arms around me, and I cried so hard. And it wasn't for me, it was for Margaret and Lisa
Mhm.
and all the other women he had killed and mutilated and raped. They all needed this. They all needed to know that he was gone now and he wasn't going to hurt us anymore. After a while, I composed myself. I looked at Scott and said, I'm hungry. Let's go to breakfast. That's my big story of the execution day.
I love it. That's great. I think Bundy ultimately confessed to 30 something, but
Yes,
people think it may be three times that. They don't really know.
right.
Catherine can probably address. And
We
also know,
haven't really even corroborated 30, frankly.
no, they really haven't. No. And who knows? He's a narcissistic sociopath, so who knows what he may be pumping up his numbers. But he also served as his own counsel. But wasn't that in the appeals and all that's the other issues? It wasn't in the trial, right?
He was at the trial, but no, he did
But
not.
he didn't ask you any
Yeah, no,
questions or anybody
no, he
else.
had his
I know.
lawyers.
I think that came later. Is that right, Catherine?
Yeah,
Remember?
and
Um,
the use of hypnosis was in one of the appeals, but
Right.
that was for the Kimberly Leach trial.
Yeah.
yes,
But I think Ted served as his own
He
attorney in
did.
something, a defense attorney, and he asked questions of different people.
Yes,
But
he
but
did.
that didn't happen to you, thank
no,
goodness. No.
no,
And he
thank
even
goodness.
tripped himself up by asking one of them how something about how
Yeah.
dark was it when you saw me? I mean, when you saw,
Yeah, exactly. Same way OJ did in If I Did It. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. I didn't mean to say that. Uh I meant if this, yeah. Um so all right, you managed to survive all this. This is an incredible story, and I know mentally and physically it took time to get over all of this and process. So when did you decide that you wanted to tell your story and that you needed to write a book about it because the world needs to hear this story?
After the execution, um, I was having a hard time going into hospitals. Well, before that, I was having a hard time in hospitals because went in one day and stayed 3 months. And then, yeah, I went in another day and had my jaw wired shut.
Yeah.
And after the attack, so hospitals became a big thing I couldn't do. I could not walk through a door, and I'd sit outside when we'd go with friends and they'd go see a baby that was just born, and I couldn't do it. And I got mad at myself. And I said, I can do this. So I went to human resources and I got a job at a bank. I mean, I'm sorry, at the hospital. And I loved it. I worked there 18 years. It was the best job I had had. This again shows me I can do this. Anything I want, I can talk myself into it. So I just felt that life had to go on. And I was excited. I was excited. I was married 6 months after the attack. In June of 78, I was married. Um, I had not dated this guy. I met him in 1978 before, in 76, I'm sorry, at a church, and we did a bunch of functions together as groups. And just at the end, we started dating. And after the attack, I went home and he went home. And my parents and his parents, I think, thought it was good that if we got together, that he could help protect me. and that I wouldn't be scared if he married me, and we could proceed. That didn't last very long. I was not married 5 years, and I figured out I didn't need him to take care of me. I didn't know him well enough to, it wasn't love and marriage, but I did have a child. I got pregnant and had my son, Michael. So that was great. That was a good thing that came out of the marriage. Mike was 2 when I got divorced. And I then was a single mom for 5 years. And actually, Mike and I grew up together because I was his mother and he was part of my strength because I knew I had to get him through. Therefore, I was helping myself as well. Um, it was a good time. Him and I and the dog, we had a great time together. One of the other things, right after I got married, I went to work at a bank. I was a teller. I was there. It was fun. I, got to be a teller and play with the money and learn all this. One day a customer came and I was the next window. So he came to my window. It was a nice looking young man, which was unusual because we lived in an area called Century Village, and most of the customers had white or blue hair. So this was somebody with brown hair, and he stood out. But as he approached my window, he had a small little leather purse and he put it on the counter. He opened it up and showed me the gun. He said, "I want your money and do it quietly." So I opened the drawer and I looked at the money and I said, "Well, I wonder if I give them ones or 20s first." They didn't teach us that in teller school. My legs are shaking and my knees are clapping and I'm just like frozen, not knowing how to give him the money. Meanwhile, the head teller was to the side of me and she saw what was going on. So she called silent button to call the police. Now I'm standing here looking at him facing the lobby. He's in front of me facing the drive-through window. And the police went through the drive-through window. So now he knows the police are on him. He grabbed his bag with his gun and he ran out of the building. And I like cried in a little ball on the ground. I was just so spent with all this energy. I heard shots in the street and they did find him and they didn't hit him with the bullets, but they did get him. And they asked me to sit in the back of a car and kind of identify him way too close than I should have been. I'm like, yeah, that's him. That never went to court, so I didn't have to testify or anything on that. But the next morning, I got up at 8 o'clock, went to the bank, was there at 9 when it opened, and ready to open my teller drawer. And people are like, "Oh my God, how can you do that?" And I'm like, "It's the safest place I can think to be right now with all the police officers in here." So it wasn't a problem for me to go back to work.
Well, that's an amazing story too. And it's like the juxtaposition of the two, that there's this guy with a gun, there's Bundy with a stick, and somehow you ended up in both places, and a
Right in the
light,
middle of it.
blue lights or the light of the car, yeah,
Yeah,
So
made the
it's been
difference.
your book theme is really about being a survivor, not just of
Yes,
Bundy, but of
yes,
a
exactly.
number of
yes.
things.
Yes, I hope I could tell the way I lived and how I made it through, and hopefully people may be able to find something in them that they can take home or maybe use in their life. And I wrote the book. I wanted to tell the book. It's been 40 years since the execution, but I wanted to tell my book when I was younger. My husband and my son, I remarried, was going to a baseball game at night. So they left, and I was sitting at my table with a blank piece of paper, and I started writing notes. And then I figured, hey, I'm sitting here writing about the past when my son and my husband were having fun living in the future. So I never really took any time then to write the story myself. But I did. I wanted to tell my story so people knew what happened to me, but also know that there's strength out there and that people have it and they don't know they have it until they need to call on it. And it's very important for them to know that if I did it, they can do it. It's hard. I mean, anyone who has had trauma in their life, I can't imagine what everyone goes through. But they have to know it wasn't their fault. What happened to them, it wasn't their fault. They don't have to be ashamed of themselves. They just need to find a place in their heart and in their minds where they can go forward. And it's hard. It's really hard. They just have to have the gut feeling to do it, or else they're just going to stay and go backwards. I mean, it's you have to do this for yourself. So when I wrote the book, I wanted to tell my story and to share my thoughts and to also talk about the 30 women that he was accused of attacking. And these women were ones that were definitely identified, the bodies that were probably him because they were in the same area as they found the other bodies, and girls that went missing while Bundy was in that time frame and in that place. So that's how they came up with the 30 women that we talk about in my book. I named each person, each girl, and I gave them a life and a story and what they wanted to do and what would have been fun for them. And it took a while to do that, to research each one, but it brought a life to me to see it. And I wanted everyone else to know them too. That's a big reason I wrote the book.
Well, that's a huge reason. I tell you, I'm so impressed. I mean, you are one tough cookie. You know, you really are. And
Thank you.
and what I really hate, and Catherine, I've talked about this before, is that to the general public, Bundy's this handsome pre-law guy who has this little problem. No. He was absolutely one of the most vicious human beings that God ever created, and people who ever got into the weeds, into the details. And I'm so glad that you will share what happened to you. But there are stories out there of what he did to others back on the West Coast, all the way to Colorado, that are just absolutely terrifying. And yet he comes across as this three-piece suit, wannabe attorney, glib, arrogant, little schmarmy guy. And people don't see how dangerous he really, really, really was. You have made that perfectly clear. Was a very dangerous human being.
Yes, he was so manipulative. He would make people think that
Mhm.
they saw what he wanted them to see.
Yes.
And he wasn't a good law student. He dropped out of two
No,
law
right.
schools. He wasn't a good, he dropped out and said he just doesn't have it in him to go through school. He never had a job. He never married. He just never did anything normal. He was just living the life he wanted to be seen as, but his true life was on the other
Right.
side. He wasn't multiple personalities or something. It
No.
was just the way he created himself. And the real thing was killing, to go out and possess these
Mhm.
women. And most of the time he would go out drunk to do this. And he used porn as a reason, I think, why he did this, when it's not necessarily the truth. It's because
No.
he had it in his mind to go out and do these things, and he did terrible things to these women, these poor, beautiful women.
Yep. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So, I mean, you're an amazing person, and I hope everybody goes and buys the book and reads your story. Where can they find it?
It is available on
Anywhere?
Amazon. On
Okay,
Amazon, yes, and other bookstores online. They can purchase it.
cool, cool. Well, what's next for you? I know
Well,
you're not sitting still.
well, um, after all this was happening, and in 1994, Scott and I decided we wanted to have a baby. So we went to the GYN, and I got pregnant pretty soon. But my husband had something to do with getting his PhD in Georgia, and he went to Europe, to Finland, to study and to do some research on what he was doing in school. So he had gone to Europe. I was then diagnosed with a lump in my breast. And I didn't want to know it was there. The doctor was mad at me for not finding it myself doing self-exams, which is so important, women, to do the self-exams. It's nothing we want to do. We just, and think of it at the first of the month, and maybe by the 13th, you'll remember to do it. But it's so important. We have to take care of ourselves. But he found the lump, and he wanted to take it out right away. And I said, no, let's wait till my husband comes home. And I didn't tell him, because if I told him the first day, he'd be home the second day, and he needed to do this for his education. And I didn't think it was anything big after all. But it went from the size of a pea to a walnut in the time it took him to get home. And they did the lumpectomy, and they found out it was cancer. So I went and did a radical mastectomy. And that was in itself hard. I had to do 9 months of chemo with this rim. And I thought, oh my gosh, chemo, lose my hair. No, anything but this. But I was given chemo, and God must have a sense of humor, because I lost a lot of my hair, but not all of it. So I was like, he said, okay, this is what you're going to get. So I did lose a lot of my hair. And as I went through the chemo, and it was so hard just remembering what I had done before, I said, I have one chemo. And Scott's like, no, you have 9 chemo, 9 months. I said, no, I have one. And when I get through with this one, I have one more. I could get through one by a time, but the big picture of 8, and I mean, it was just like, that was too overwhelming for me. So it might have been my 6th treatment, but I only had one more left. And that kind of put me in a state of, I can do this. I can do it. Sure, I can, So that kind of led me on to the fact that we were then going to have a baby, and I got pregnant. We're so happy. And then 8 weeks in, I had a miscarriage. And so many women have miscarriages, and my heart breaks for each one, and each one has their story and how they survived. But I survived it. I was sad. It was sad. I got pregnant again. And at 12 weeks, I had another miscarriage. And Scott and I decided this wasn't going to happen. And I can do anything for me. I'm strong enough that I feel like I can do what I need to do and be okay. But I couldn't help my little babies. There were some I couldn't help. So we decided not to try for any more children. And we went and got a sailboat and called her Sally. That became our new baby.
That is funny.
So that was a long time ago. But recently, I just came off of 2.5 months sailing, a sail trip. We purchased a used boat in Miami, and we had to sail it back around South Florida, where I live. And 2.5 months later, we finally got home. We were having so much fun. We went in and out of the islands and the Keys, and we had some major repairs to be done on a used boat at different ports. And, things happened along the way that were really trying as far as, are we going to get through this? Or are we going to die tonight? With the bad weather and the seas. And it was just a lot of things that we went through. But we came home. It was on the 16th. We actually made it home. And I thought I'd never be in my bed again. It was just so hot on the boat and so miserable, but so many things to look at. And, go to sleep at night with 5 pounds of bug spray on you, just so you don't get bit and around your ears. And it was 2.5 months like that. So to sleep in a nice bed in sheets, that was like just the greatest. So we look forward to more sailing trips and camping. We have a new camper that we bought, and we're going next month for a couple of weeks and just going to ride around and do stuff. I don't want to sit down and do nothing. We retired, and it's like, okay, where do we go next?
Good for you.
Thank you.
Catherine, you have any questions or anything you want to talk
No,
about?
I mean, we've known each other for years.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
heard the story several times, and
Yes.
So,
Well, Kathy, this has been great, and I truly, truly appreciate you sharing your story with our listeners and whatnot. And I think it's going to have a huge impact. And I hope the book sales continue and continue and continue. And I just
Thank
want to
you.
thank you so, so, so much for sharing this, because this is all deeply personal, and yet you are tough. My God, you are tough.
Thank you. I'd like to just mention on the book um, that it was written with my co-author, Emilie Le Beau Lucchesi.
Right.
She heard my story for 2 hours every Tuesday. We'd sit and we'd talk, and I would close my eyes and I would literally go through like the stories I told you. And I do that now. I relive what I'm doing. And she took those thoughts and wrote them down so well that I just couldn't have done it any better myself. But she's remarkable in what she did, and I'm so glad she helped me with it.
Well, thanks to her too. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing it. And wow, wow, wow. That's all it is. So, well, that wraps up this episode of Criminal Mischief here on the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series. And we'll be back with more, as you know. So until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun. Try not to get caught. We'll see you then.